But before we start talking about forgiveness in and of itself, I want to talk about a few terms that people mix up all the time. People usually mix up trust, healing, restoration, and forgiveness. Now, you may be wondering, like, how do they mix those things up? Here's how they do it. A lot of times a person assumes that when they don't trust a person on the level that they used to, they assume that they haven't forgiven them. Or when a person still needs healing, they assume that they haven't forgiven someone because they still are experiencing inner pain. Or a person assumes that they haven't forgiven someone because they haven't restored that person to the place that they were in their life previously. And I want to break this down really quick because it's important to know the difference so that you can understand what forgiveness actually is, what restoration is, what trust is, and what healing is. So here's a couple examples. The way that it works is this. Sometimes with healing, a person still needs some type of healing in order for them to feel better. But that doesn't mean that they haven't forgiven. And here's a great example, or just a quick little metaphor, or really an example that's happened to me before, where I'm walking or running or doing some type of activity and a person steps on my foot and I twist my ankle. Now, there's pain that's there. I'm disappointed. I'm upset because I don't like the way that the pain feels. But in the moment, I usually forgive the person pretty quickly because they didn't mean to do it. Or it may take a moment for me to be like, oh man, like it's cool. Don't worry about it, right? Well, in that moment, I've forgiven them. I let it go. I don't want nothing bad to happen to them. We good. They don't have a problem with me. I don't have a problem with them. So I've forgiven them. I've moved on, right? But here's the deal. The pain in my ankle is actually still there. Now, the same thing can happen emotionally where the pain still exists, not because you haven't forgiven the person, but because you really need some healing. And what I mean is this. There are things that have happened in your past that really, really hurt, but you don't really have anything against the person specifically. You don't hate them. You don't want anything bad to happen to them. And it's really not an issue with the person, but your life is still being impacted by the event itself. And so you may just need some healing and some breakthrough in that area, but it has nothing to do with forgiveness because you actually are not, you don't hold anything against that person. It's just your life is still being negatively impacted by that particular event. So it may not be forgiveness. It may just be a need for healing, right? The next thing is trust. Sometimes people assume that because they don't trust a person anymore or trust the person on the level that they used to, they assume that they haven't forgiven the person. But that's not true at all. Everybody has a trust meter. And when somebody violates your trust, they have to earn your trust back. Now, obviously, you should be gracious at times when it comes to, giving people another chance, especially if they haven't shown a pattern of doing that same thing over and over again. But the truth is, everybody has to earn your trust back. So an example would be if somebody violated your trust in a relationship or, even a friendship or romantic relationship, right? And then the person is kind of like, hey, like, I thought you forgave me, but you still are, a little hesitant to trust them in certain areas. Or if somebody maybe violated your trust with money and they're like, hey, can I borrow such and such amount of dollars or whatever? And you're a little hesitant. And the person is like, oh, you still mad at me or you didn't forgive me for what happened last time. And the truth is, it's not that you didn't forgive them. It's just that you're a little more watchful now because they violated your trust. And so they have to earn your trust back in order for you to give them that money again or whatever the case may be. There's 1,000 examples that I could use, but I hope you get the point that a lot of times it's not even about forgiveness. It's about them earning your trust back and kind of proving that they can handle, whatever it is that you're about to give them, right? Then the third thing is restoration. Now, remember, we're talking briefly about the terms that people confuse all the time with forgiveness. The third thing is restoration, right? In relationships, sometimes people are at a particular place and they assume that because they haven't been restored to that particular place, that there's no forgiveness involved. And that's not necessarily true at all. Sometimes a person or an overall relationship may not be exactly how it was before, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't any forgiveness. You can forgive someone and decide, hey, we need to part ways, or because of what happened, maybe was so damaging or so difficult or so hard. It may be that you forgave them, but it just may be best for the health of the overall relationship and everybody involved that you kind of just move on. And there's nothing wrong with that. It may be difficult. It may be hard, but that doesn't mean that you haven't forgiven the person just because the restoration is not there. Now, I know some people who are thinking, wait a minute, I thought forgiveness was restoration. Well, restoration can be a major part of forgiveness, but it doesn't always work like that. Sometimes with restoration, a person is restored back to a certain place, but maybe not back to the exact same place that they were before. Now, this is critical because there's several different biblical examples, and I didn't want to focus on this too much, but I want to make sure you understand, for those who may be listening saying, well, is it really forgiveness if the person is not trusted? Is it really forgiveness if the person is not healed? Is it really forgiveness if the person is not restored? Yes, it can exist. And I'm going to give you an example of how there can be a few different things that line up with trust and healing and restoration and forgiveness, but not all operating at the same time. When you look at King David in the Bible, King David had a variety of transgressions, and God forgave him. And at times he trusted him to do certain things, right? And he healed him and so on and so forth, right? But that doesn't mean that he was restored to the exact same place that he was before. And so on one particular occasion, King David is saying, like, God, I want to build your temple. Lord, I want to build this house for you. You know, I want to do this for you. And God had to let him know, hey, listen, of course you're forgiven. Of course I love you, right? And of course you are who you are to me. And of course you're a man after my own heart. But I can't let you build the temple because there's too much blood on your hands. There's too much innocent blood on your hands. And that's not something that I want you to do. It didn't mean that God loved him less. It didn't mean that, God hated him because of what he did. It just meant that he was forgiven, but he's not necessarily trusted or entrusted to do that particular assignment. And it doesn't make David a bad person. It just means that he wasn't able to do what he would have been able to do before had he not done what he did, right? Now, there's another example in the Bible with the Apostle Peter, where I believe all four things are in operation. That doesn't happen all the time, but it's something that does happen. So with Peter, if you remember, Peter denied Jesus, right? Well, after Peter denied Jesus, Peter was not only forgiven, he was also restored, he was healed, and then Jesus trusted him to lead the other apostles and to minister to the Lord's sheep. Now that's powerful because all four are in operation. And if you're blessed enough to have encounters where all four are in operations, where there's healing, there's more trust, and there's restoration and forgiveness, that is a blessing. And we hope that happens more times than not. But the key is to understand that they're different. And I don't want you to get stuck thinking that you haven't forgiven or that forgiveness is even the issue, when really the issue might just be trust, restoration, or a need for more healing. All right. Well, anyhow, let's get into the forgiveness part.